Welcome to Sacred Realms. It's a great day in Hyrule, y'all. Welcome to Sacred Realms, a Zelda Retrospective Podcast. I am your host, Lyndon Willoughby, usually joined by my co-host, Matt Willoughby. Bit of a shakeup here this week, y'all. Matt is on a mountain, and when you're on a mountain, it's hard to make some pod. I've always said that. That's definitely something I've been known to say from time to time. With that being the case, we're going to do something a little special here today. My co-host for the evening, I just want to throw this out here real quick. Last week, Cody got the opportunity to become Josh from ZU. So Josh from ZU, how do you feel about this week becoming Matt? Does that sound fun to you?
Yes, it sounds like the most exciting thing I've ever done, other than play Triforce Heroes.
Notably, like one of the world's most exciting things. I mean, true daredevils play Triforce Heroes, is what I've always heard.
Yes, especially by yourself.
Yeah, exactly. That's where the real rush is. Josh, very happy to have you on the show tonight, filling in for Matt. He's taken some well-deserved time off. He's with some friends in Colorado. They're having a truly gorgeous time. They're having a much better time, I think, on top of a mountain, at least weather-wise, than we are right now. You and I are still stuck in like the flaming hellscape of everything.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to cool off this week and maybe hit a nice 95.
Great. Cool. That's awesome. There was a beautiful moment just a few minutes ago for me when I looked outside and I realized that the sun was down and yet it was still 102 degrees Fahrenheit. So, that's great. That's the life that we all want to live for ourselves. Especially, I mean, I'm pretty sure you're in an apartment, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, cool. You've got, somebody who's taking care of your HVAC system and all that. We live in a slightly older home, and it is not energy efficient, like in the slightest. It is not up to modern build spec. We love it very much, but when we get these like weeks in a row of oppressive like triple digit heat, it's just absolutely miserable. So these are all the fun things about living in Texas, which is a thing that I kind of like willingly choose to continue doing. All that is to say, Matt's having a great week. I told him, hey, take it easy, take a load off. We'll catch you back next week, and he can kind of fill us in on some of his thoughts on what happened in the interim when he gets back. Josh, we have not caught up with you, however, since we first got into our journey with Phantom Hourglass, and definitely very excited to do so because I get the impression that you may not be the most rabid of Phantom Hourglass haters in the world, and we're looking for a little bit of positivity at this point in our season. So am I kind of on the mark there?
I mean, yes, I am generally... I'm more positive toward all Zelda games than the average player, probably. I definitely still have some criticism and some history with this one, but no, I think it's a fun game.
Okay. And I mean, notably, we are... actually, let me check the schedule. I'm pretty sure we are... Right. Yeah, we are smack dab in the middle of this game now. We're actually just a touch past the halfway point. We're exactly at the halfway point of the season when you count the rank and recap episodes. So this is definitely about the time in the game where I think, generally speaking, Matt's and my opinions on it have started to solidify just a little bit, for better or worse. And so definitely a point in the season where it's really fun to bring in different perspectives and, get I guess a widening of viewpoints that are represented on the show. We are going to do that thing real quick where every time we have a guest on, when they haven't been on in that season yet, we're going to catch up with you you on your history with this game and how you feel about it overall and how many times you've played it, if you can even remember. Before we get into that, I mean, you, much like Cody, have been living in Tears of the Kingdomsville over at Zelda Universe for quite a while now. How's all that going? I mean, are y'all keeping up with it, or are things still pretty exciting for you specifically? I mean, I know you kind of handle a different whole element of that community than Cody does.
Right. So I think Cody kind of alluded to it a little bit. It's kind of settled some, but we've still got a pretty strict spoiler policy. So there's only so much we're covering at the moment as far as what we can cover in a feature, or one of our normal weekly columns, which is the writing side. The website side is more what I'm dealing with, where Cody handles more of the social media, YouTube kind of stuff. We have been publishing guides. I've written quite a few of them myself. Unfortunately, I got very busy starting basically at the beginning of July and have been a little just unable to write stuff since then. So it's all still chugging along, but we have an infinite number of shrine guides. I don't even know how many shrines there are anymore. I've forgotten. So there's an infinite number of things to write about over the next 30 years.
And in my head, I'm thinking that number is 150. But at the same time, I feel like maybe it was a not
I think
exactly round number.
Now
like
that you say that, I think it's 152.
Okay.
I think. I'm not 100% sure on that. But yeah, no, it's still exciting. There's maybe a little bit of burnout once you've played a game for 200 hours. You kind of need a break. I have not been playing as diligently as I did for that first 6 or 7 weeks where I spent all of my free time playing the game and not doing anything else. Now I've made time to play Phantom Hourglass and play some other games I skipped out on because of Tears of the Kingdom and so on.
I definitely feel that it's been weird for me because obviously I was, Tears of the Kingdom is the game that we've all been looking forward to for such a long time. And obviously, I've played what would be quite a bit of game time for me at this stage in my life. I would say I'm probably somewhere like 60 or 70 hours into the game, which I know is nothing compared to what a lot of folks have. But it's a big deal, for me. It's definitely less than I probably would have had with Breath of the Wild at the same point in its release timetable. But life circumstances are just different. But it's interesting, right? Because I've got to find time to play Phantom Hourglass for the season. I'm trying to find that way still to play Tears of the Kingdom where I'm not stressing myself out minute to minute. And I'm trying to take stock of exactly what I would be comfortable not finishing before I go and beat the game. Because, on the other side of things, there's that ever present fear that the end might get spoiled for me. Right. Which I know Matt was really big about just kind of powering through some stuff and going and finishing the game because, he was just adamant that he did not want to know any element of what happened at the end of the story. And I would say that I'm mostly there, but also I don't feel like I've been brushing too close to having that ruined for me yet. So I'm treading lightly, but am kind of more purposefully headed towards the back section of that game now. I'm heading towards the Gerudo region at the moment, and getting that last temple done, and then finishing up a few other things, and then I'll probably just kind of head in and finish it out.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same spot. I haven't actually finished the main story. I'm not super worried about spoilers, just because my assumption is kind of that we win and
right.
We don't all die at the end, and so I think I more or less just know what's going to happen at the end. But I don't watch the Twitch streamers if they're playing Zelda, and I don't watch all the YouTube videos that I would usually watch from folks I like. So there's been notably less Zelda videos in my life. But aside from that, I'm about at the point where I'm ready to finish it. I've got some Yiga related things I want to do still before I just go to the end. But I'll be playing it for forever because I'm one of those I'm one of the folks who got all the Korok seeds in Breath of the Wild, and I'm going to do it again for Tears of the Kingdom. I'm only doing it once. I don't do it ever more than once. I'll do all the shrines more than once or something like that. But Koroks, I'll do it once to say I did it. And so I'm sure I'll be just working on that for months or years. And I've already got kind of a built-in routine of, since I'm one of ZU's streamers each week, I kind of just have a block of time every week where I can this is Tears of the Kingdom time, even if I don't play it at all other than that one time. So yeah. I'll probably have it done in the next month or so.
Gotcha. Yeah, I just cleared out. Oh, thanks, babe. Appreciate you. Love you too. My wife just brought me a little espresso because I'm struggling over here. It was a late night last night. I just got done clearing out Lorelland Village, and that was a ton of fun. Went over and visited Eventide Island, and so I'm done with most everything that I wanted to get done with over in that Faron region, and so now it's off to the desert, and we'll find out what happens there. Everyone keeps talking about it like it's just a really excellent section of the game, just generally speaking. So I'm very excited to get into it.
Yeah, no, I definitely like the Gerudo area, but I won't say any more about it. Just coincidentally, I also just did Lorelland Village. And like we said, like I have like 100 hours more in the game than you, and I had not been anywhere over there.
I mean, how fun was that though, right? I thought it was
it's pretty neat. But that's kind of where I left off last time I played. I had cleared that out and was just kind of wandering and found a hole that went down in the depths and fell down. And like, I'm done for the night. So now I'm just kind of...
and then I actually went straight from Lorelland Village over to Eventide Island, and won't talk about what I got into over there, but it was fun. It was definitely time well spent. I'm definitely in a place with that game where I'm still highly enjoying myself. It's not overstayed its welcome, and I'm feeling like I'm having a pretty excellent time whenever I get into it. So that's a good place to be. That's a good feeling.
Yep. No, it's excellent. I'm super thrilled with it.
Well, it's been a fun little catch up on Tears of the Kingdom. But how about we get into a conversation about the game of the evening? That would be The Legend of Zelda Phantom Hourglass. Slightly less topical, slightly less trendy in the moment, but it is what we're here to discuss. So
only slightly less trendy.
Notable almost 20-year-old game, The Legend of Zelda Phantom Hourglass. Hovering somewhere in the bottom quarter of most people's ranking lists. Yeah, I would say it's just like just a little bit less hot than Tears of the Kingdom. Mega hit that it is. So regardless, you know what? There's some fun stuff to talk about here, and I think it's going to be a great conversation. I actually am really excited to talk to you about this week's chunk of game because surprise, surprise, I actually had some overall positive feelings about it and thought that it was a point in the game where some things start to coalesce in kind of a nice way. But before we get into that, let's talk about your general history with the game. Tell us about the first time that you played Phantom Hourglass, I guess.
Okay, so I played it launch day, which has been the case pretty much. I'm sure I've said this before, but basically starting with Majora's Mask onward, I've played near every Zelda game the day it was released, and really beginning with A Link to the Past, I played them in release order. So no, I've played it. I played it starting at the beginning. You asked about how many times I had played earlier. I believe I have only finished it 3 times. This time being my 4th time through it. So it's definitely one that I don't take the time to replay as frequently. But when it came out, I was actually pretty high on it. I really liked it a lot. Right now, it sits at almost the very bottom of my Zelda list, with only the other DS game being below it. However, that is in large part because the last time I played both of them was on a Wii U gamepad, and definitely soured my experience some because if you think the microphone stuff is annoying on a DS, try doing it on a Wii U. It basically does not work. I almost had to quit Spirit Tracks.
I mean, that sounds terrible, and
Yeah.
that feedback is something that I've heard from most everybody who's played the game on both platforms. So I was kind of kicking myself there for a bit that I didn't take the opportunity to grab either game on my Wii U when that eShop was still up, and now I would say I'm not really, I'm certainly not losing any sleep over it.
As I say, it has some benefits. Like, it's not all down. I'm glad I'm revisiting it on real hardware now. Though I'm playing on a 3DS and not an original DS. And I already suspect Phantom Hourglass is going to get some bumps up, maybe above some of those multiplayer Zelda games on my list. But the Wii U has a bigger screen. So when, like, earlier in the season, y'all have been talking about how you should get a big stylus because your hand is always in the way. And I was just like, I can't remember that happening. And now, like, I actually went and I have a pen-sized stylus now to play, but on the Wii U, it doesn't really happen. You have so much space and to move your hand around that it didn't bother me as much. You've also got, like, a bunch of different screen layout options, so you can make the bottom screen like the full size, full height of the Wii U gamepad and make it very big, and make the top screen very small. And since it's just your map, and you can have it up off to the right, it actually kind of feels better. And if you get really good, you can actually play it on a TV because it'll just mirror what's on the gamepad to the TV. So I really liked that. The big problem comes in when you need to, like, do those boss fights and you need the vertical screens. You can swap it to that layout, but that means you have to hold the Wii U gamepad vertically. And I don't know if you ever played on a Wii U really, but it's not flat like the Switch is. It has a big bump on the top of it.
Right, yeah.
So even if you lay it down on a counter, you're playing tilted to the right. And so it's very awkward to do that. But the microphone stuff is the problem with the Wii U. But I'm glad that I have them and got to try it. But I definitely recommend the original hardware.
I will say, a lot of people have kind of mentioned in those early episodes, Matt and I were saying that we were finding the dated, shall we say, dated graphics to be particularly noticeable. And some people in the Discord especially were pointing out to us that one reason we may be feeling that way is because playing on the 3DS, that lower screen is a bit bigger and it loses some crispness versus what the smaller lower screen of the DS was working with. Is that problem exacerbated on the Wii U?
Probably. I'm probably not the right person to ask. I don't focus too hard on the graphics. Like, I can see it and I'm like, yeah, this is not. They could have done this as 2D sprites and it would look beautiful, and no one would ever say anything about it. But even on the original DS, it was never a particularly pretty game. That was 2D was still very much just out of style at the time. And when like the Nintendo DS was announced, they headlined it with Super Mario 64 runs on this handheld. And then immediately followed it up with, here's Metroid Prime. And so it was all about, like, we have 3D. Well, it's not all about, but a big part of it was that it had 3D capabilities. So it's not surprising to me that Nintendo seemingly mandated that all of their major releases needed to use 3D graphics. And since I probably said this at some point before, like, I love the Wind Waker art style. Like, I wish it was still the art style that Zelda had just stuck with. And so I was pretty much just excited that I was getting more of it.
Somewhere on the mountain, Matt just felt a little twitch.
I said multiple times on social media and upset many people in the lead up to Tears of the Kingdom, saying that I would be thrilled if they just came up a month before release and said, psych, it's all going to be cel shaded and here's the bug eyes. then like I would have been totally on board. Very, very excited. So Toon Link is kind of just linked to me.
Would have certainly caused a dust up. Yeah, I mean, of course, with Wind Waker being Matt's least favorite video game of all time, of course, in harsh contrast to Skyward Sword, which is his favorite video game of all time. I think he particularly might have had an issue with that. That's all gross exaggeration, of course, but no, I do agree with you. I think. I'm hesitant to say that I think that the Wind Waker style should have been the style in perpetuity. But I definitely do think that it was kind of ushered out before it had completely run its course. You know, I think it had one, maybe two games in which it was really capitalized on to its full potential. And every other instance of it was kind of like, yeah, maybe this was not like the, you know, we really weren't able to make this happen in a way that is doing it any favors. That's, you know, Spirit Tracks and Phantom Hourglass obviously are kind of suboptimal expressions of it.
They use it for the official art in a lot of games, even as recently as Triforce Heroes. They used it for all of the official artwork. Sorry, I turned away from the microphone for a second there. So they did keep it around for that, and of course it's in Smash Brothers, so folks are familiar with it. But no, the Wind Waker really never did get its big moment. But it probably is more it was partially because of backlash. That then, you know, that's a whole story with Twilight Princess. But I think Max has even mentioned how there was actually some practical problems of like they wanted him to ride a horse, and he's just not the right proportions to ride a horse.
Yeah. Right, exactly.
And so there's stuff like that where they felt limited. So I get it. I get why it's not. But I do love him. So I wish he was like that. I wish it had all worked.
You're preaching to the choir. I think it's a gorgeous art style. It's so weird to me though that it was that they used that art style for the Triforce Heroes official art when the A Link Between Worlds official art was most definitely not that, but they were kind of like very similar games in every other respect.
Well, and technically they're on the record saying that it's a sequel, that it's the same hero.
Yeah.
That's according to the timeline. It's the same hero. Doesn't really make any sense, but that's where they plopped it. And yeah, it's totally different art. The art for A Link Between Worlds is like completely unique. But yeah, I'm going to back up for a second because I jumped into Wii U problems pretty quickly. But like, did you have a Nintendo DS when this came out?
I did have one. So I'm trying to remember. So Matt and Jackson and I all shared one, and I don't want to say that any of us spent a whole lot of time on it. I spent a lot of time playing the Super Mario 64 remake on it because that game, like the original Mario 64, was a huge one for me. And so I definitely had a lot of fun playing the remake on the DS. I look back on it now and kind of can realize that it's not necessarily superior in any way to the original one or even the remaster that they just put on the Switch. But like,
except it's got those fun casino games.
It does. And I do think that I know, right? I do think there actually is something pretty fun about the way that the other characters were integrated into it. I just like, if you were going to ask me like if I could only have one or the other, I'd probably choose to stick with the original, you know, the 120 stars and just Mario and all that. But so anyway, I played Mario 64 DS on it, and I never played Phantom Hourglass or Spirit Tracks. I did not play any Zelda on the DS. It was kind of a console, like, so the GameCube and the DS for me was an era of Nintendo that I just kind of fell out of things a little bit. I had an Xbox at the time. I was playing a lot of Halo. I was in junior high, so I was kind of doing more of that like Halo, Call of Duty sort of thing. And didn't really hop back into the Nintendo ecosystem until the Wii and the 3DS. And then that was like in the beginning-ish of college. And then I got like real hard back into it from that point on. So I did miss the DS just a little bit.
Okay. And I got that feeling just listening to the conversations about it, because like I was kind of the opposite, right? I was very much a diehard Nintendo fan at the time. Nintendo's E3 2004 press conference, which is mostly famous for the Twilight Princess trailer, is also where they first showed the DS. And that's where I mentioned they showed Mario and Metroid. And it's like, I more or less know every bit of that conference. I've watched it probably 36 times. And I was completely on board. They showed the DS, all the little things it would do. Iwata got on stage and said that, basically teased the Wii, calling it their revolution, right? And so they got up and started talking about how adding a touchscreen, adding a microphone, all of these things were just going to change your mind about gaming forever, basically. And I was completely they hooked me. And so I was a Nintendo DS day one buyer. It was the first piece of video game hardware I ever bought on launch day. And I was in high school at the time. And then I basically proceeded to buy essentially every first party release they put out, as much as I could afford at 16. And so by the time we got around to Zelda 3 years later, a lot of the things that were like really novel about playing with a touchscreen or having to yell at your console were not really that special to me anymore. It was just kind of, yeah, this is how gaming is now. And so it didn't bother me the same way. I actually I looked earlier and kind of took note of games that I had back then, and even just games I missed that I know how they operate that came out before Zelda. And there's a lot of them where, like, Metroid Prime Hunters is a first-person shooter you control with the touchscreen. And so I had already done a whole first-person adventure with a touchscreen. Kirby and Yoshi had games where you essentially had to draw the paths they would walk in like platforming style. And then there's been some discussion already, I know, in the Discord, and Max found quotes about Trace Memory, which is basically a point-and-click adventure game. But it has a lot of these almost like, I would say, Zelda-esque puzzles, basically, or the same kinds of things where like Phantom Hourglass made you blow on the map to clean it off, right? Trace Memory I had done that in Trace Memory 2 years earlier. And also the closing the DS trick was in Trace Memory 2 years earlier. So all of that stuff was kind of old to me by the time I got to Phantom Hourglass, but I was still just totally riding everything Nintendo wanted to do. And of course, by now we were getting into the Wii also. I would have had a Wii already by the time this had come out. And yeah, it's sort of it's a sort of like in the era kind of thing, where now it's the same thing I said about Skyward Sword. I think the touch controls and the motion controls all work great, and I loved them when the games came out, and I just thought it was amazing. Now I just don't want to do it anymore.
Right. Yeah.
And that's kind of just where I'm at. I'm just kind of, it's old now, and I just don't want to do it anymore. And so I'm happy we have Skyward Sword with an option not to. We don't officially have Phantom Hourglass in a way to not do it. But if they're listening, you can do an HD remaster of this game and make it look like the Wind Waker HD, and that would be brilliant.
Oh, no, absolutely. I think, for as frustrated as this game has made me at points, I do think that were an actual remaster to be announced and released, and, it had like a slick art style, and it had some refinements to some of the movement, and, like a retooling of the way that the microphone stuff works. I think that it would literally, that's all that it would take for me to enthusiastically replay this game. And for it to actually probably climb quite a bit higher up on my ranking. I mean, not that I've ranked it yet, and I'm not trying to get too much ahead of that discussion, because I want to be very clear. I have not even in my own mind decided where I'm putting this yet. So, but anyway,
I was going to say, like, the one thing I would say I've pretty much always been down on is the Temple of the Ocean King. which is just the common refrain of it's timed stealth that kills you with one hit KO enemy. It's just they read a list of all the things people don't like and put it into a dungeon that you have to do over and over.
Yeah.
So that part, it had always kind of been sour to me, but I liked the rest of it so much that it didn't matter. I was honestly surprised when y'all started talking about it, the overworld, the ocean, and talking about it like it wasn't an overworld. That had never occurred to me before, because to me, it's just like the Wind Waker to me. It always has been. It had never really occurred to me that it was more like Zelda 2 than it is like the Wind Waker.
Yeah, and I actually, that is one thing that I would like to get back to once we actually get into the Sacred Realms rundown, because it is opened up a little bit more in this chunk of games. So I'm excited to talk about that. One thing I am kind of curious about before we sort of move on and get into that section of the episode, you had said that so currently these games are pretty close to the bottom of your ranking. This one is second from the bottom. You said that actually a big part of that had come down to last time you played them was on the Wii U, and that had kind of soured you on certain elements of them. You're playing it now on its original platform on the DS, or at least you're playing it on a 3DS.
Yeah, I'm playing it on a new Nintendo 3DS XL. So
okay, which is exactly what I'm playing it on.
Significantly nicer than the old. Like, I didn't even have a DS Lite at the time. I was on the day one DS.
Yeah, I'm playing it on my Majora's Mask 3DS, which is my baby. I love that system. But do you think that there is a better than even chance that, I don't know, playing it on the system it was intended to be played on this time around might cause it to regain some places in your ranking, or do you think it's pretty solidified at this point?
No, like I think that it's likely it will go up. And part of that is, like I mentioned, how I kind of got just tired of the touch controls and motion controls. And for all of my talking about loving Triforce Heroes, I'm kind of at a point where I'm just a little bit tired of the multiplayer Zelda stuff, especially playing it by myself.
Sure.
Because nobody is. I haven't played it with anybody in many years at this point. So I'm kind of like, I was kind of getting a little bit bored of doing that. And so I feel like it's likely these will, or Phantom Hourglass at this point will regain some standing. But I don't know that it really has much chance against, it would be going against the Oracle games, which are kind of the next bottom of my list, traditional Zelda games. And I don't think I'm there yet. But my list is not very solidified. I probably have a lot of recency bias, and that's why I kind of reshuffle it. I know most people just kind of have an imaginary list in their head, and I actually keep a spreadsheet and document it. So, because I'm crazy.
It's very organized of you. And I do have to say, for the purposes of making pod, that's actually very convenient. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I may have said this before in the past. I did that because people kept asking me, like during Twitch streams, what are your favorite Zelda games? What are your top 10? Well, do you like this one better than this one? And so I was like, I need an answer just so I can reference this is the answer. And so I kind of revisit it once a year, maybe a little more often, and just kind of fiddle with it based on how I'm feeling. And so it does change a lot. Like the top 5 doesn't change very much, but especially once you get into past number 10, it all shuffles frequently. So I think Phantom Hourglass will probably regain some standing. Spirit Tracks maybe won't have so much luck, but we'll see.
I wish I could say that I was as confident in our ranking. It's kind of, I'm sort of right now thinking about it and coming down on the side of I just have no freaking clue where this game is going to end up. So that's an exciting place to be in its own way. But yeah, definitely this game is taking us on a ride at the moment. So very, very fun. This is going to be the rank and recap episode for this one. But thanks for, giving us a rundown of your history with the game. Glad to get all that interesting perspective, and I feel like especially the fact that you played this in multiple formats is gonna be really nice as we go forward into our discussion about this whole chunk of everything that we got up to this week. What do you say that we get into the housekeeping real quick, get that out of the way, and then dive right into the Sacred Realms rundown, talk more specifically about the contents of Phantom Hourglass Chapter 5.
Let's do it.
Awesome. All right, y'all. If you didn't know, Sacred Realms is a weekly re-examination of The Legend of Zelda, one little slice at a time. Sacred Realms drops every Wednesday and is available on all major podcast networks. Every week, we play a new section of a Zelda game, and then we sit down here to talk and to drop our hot takes. If that sounds fun to you, please head over to Apple Podcasts, hit that subscribe button, and be sure to leave us a review. 5-star reviews are greatly appreciated, and they have a chance to get a shout out here on the show. This actually reminds me, we do have a 5-star review queued up that I want to let off the chain here real quick. We've actually gotten a few over the last few weeks, and we're going to be scattering those over the next few episodes. But to everybody who has written a 5-star review recently, we truly do appreciate you. This one comes from, let's see. This one comes from Annendorf, who says, I've never been into podcasts, but I recently stumbled upon yours, and I'm hooked. I grew up playing Zelda games and have beaten nearly every single one of them. I've been in a very dark place this year following a divorce, and your pod has helped me keep my head up and remember that there are people just like me out there. Your podcast has been a light from the forest clad in green. Keep it up. Well, Annendorf, I appreciate those words very much. As somebody who, similarly to you, has a failed marital situation in their past, I know exactly what that feels like. I know that it's no fun, and I know that during times like that, it's very helpful to find things that bring you joy and to stay focused on those. So I'm happy to hear that we could be one of those things for you, and definitely glad to hear that you're enjoying the show. Those things are always really great to hear, and by far one of the weirdest things about making a product for public consumption is occasionally hearing that it's had like a personal impact on somebody or like helped a person through a difficult thing. We're just talking about video games, and I think in some ways it's always going to feel, just kind of like dinky, nerdy stuff like that to me. But, just wild that it transcends that into something a bit more real every now and again. So really kind words, and really, truly appreciate that. If y'all want a little bit more Sacred Realms in your life, you can head over to patreon.com/Sacred Realms Pod to get access to our Discord channel, listener mail, vote on what game we play next, and much more. That Discord channel is really a humongous blessing. We got a lot of great folks in there. And so if you're just looking for anybody to talk about Zelda with online, I highly recommend hopping into any level of our Patreon and getting access to that Discord channel, because as Josh, I think, can attest to, the community in there is like really excellent. And honestly, I feel like even besides talking about Zelda, we just kind of have a really great time just, shooting the breeze with one another over random stuff even. So it's a really great time in there. Additionally, one of the benefits that Master Sword patrons and above get is that we read their names every week here on the show. Those legendary individuals are Jerry, Dante 2, Tom, Gavin, Stephanie, Deck Officer, Billy, Connor, Rachel, Shepherd Street, Matthew, Chris, Daniel, Fallout 907, Kelso, Tiffany the Star, Patrice, Stephanie, Darknuck, Brian, and I should go back and say Il Maestro himself, Darknuck, Brian, Mike, Dylan, Lennon, Melanie, Kolku, Aiden, Rowan, Josh, Nick, Dante, Gep, Brittany, Davey, Haru the Mighty, Derek, Albert, Mark, Andy, Cameron, Ben, Daniel, Nick D_TV, Travis, Christian, Hyrule Interviews, aka Max Nichols, Garrett, and Drew. These are the most legendary of individuals, and I would delve deeper into the Temple of the Ocean King with any one of them at any time. And it hurt me just a little bit to say that, but for the purposes of maintaining the format, I had to come up with something. So there you have it. But without further ado, let's talk about what we played this week. We do that every week, of course, in the Sacred Realms Rundown, which is a 6-part analysis of what we played this week and the feelings that it made us feel. Part 1 of the Sacred Realms Rundown is the plot recap. This week, read by me. That's 2 in a row for me. And I got to say that every time I do one of these, I have a new respect for Matt. as it like really does take a minute to sit down and kind of bang one of these out. And yeah, he's really great at what he's doing. But I hope that I can fill his shoes just to a small extent. We'll see how I do with this one. Of course, we're covering the content of Phantom Hourglass Chapter 5. This will be the plot recap as read by me. Josh, this is where you get to step in and say, take it away, Lyndon.
Take it away, Lyndon.
Well done. You sounded just like Matt. It was uncanny. With the petrified Tetra now safely stored in the cargo hold of Linebeck's ship, we turn our attention to trying to locate the blacksmith Zauz, who Oshus says is the only living soul who can forge a blade capable of defeating Bellum. We search high and low in the Northwest Seas and eventually come across an island that isn't charted on any map. Linebeck docks the ship, and we proceed to the island's only man-made structure. Inside is a man hunched over an anvil. He turns to us and introduces himself as Zauz, the blacksmith that we have been searching for. He explains that he is a friend of Oshus, and that in a time long past, his people forged weapons which were capable of defeating Bellum. What we need, he tells us, is a phantom sword, a powerful blade that would surely spell doom for the cursed monster. Ciela is excited to hear that a solution may be so close at hand, and asks Zauz to hand us the phantom sword. He reluctantly admits that he doesn't currently have one in his possession, but that he is able to forge us a new one. This presents its own set of issues, however. Since a phantom sword can only be forged by combining 3 rare minerals, crimsonine, azurine, and aquanine. Zauz does not possess these pure metals, but conveys to us an ancient legend that they were gifted to 3 tribes that dwelt upon the Great Sea. We haven't heard of any tribes before, but we know that there is much more of the Great Sea to explore, and these tribes must surely dwell there. Zauz tells us to re-enter the Temple of the Ocean King in search of a new sea chart, which confuses us because we were sure that we had already explored the deepest depths of the temple. Zauz reveals that the door, which we previously had to inscribe an hourglass upon, can take you to other areas of the temple if other symbols are drawn upon it. He shows us an inscription of the crest that will grant us access to the lower levels of the temple, and it takes the familiar shape of 3 triangles. We are less than excited to be visiting the temple again, however we are in great need of that new sea chart, and so we gather up Linebeck and strike back out onto the open seas. On our way back to Merkay Island, we are intercepted by a fearsome pirate vessel captained by a formidable warrior woman named Jolene. She appears to have a bone to pick with Linebeck and quickly overtakes our smaller, slower ship. She boards the SS Linebeck and proceeds immediately into the ship's hold, but Linebeck is nowhere to be seen. Her eyes turn towards us, and when we don't give up Linebeck's location, she draws her sword and battle commences. After a fierce duel, Jolene is disarmed and scurries back to her vessel. Once she's gone from the ship, Linebeck emerges from a nearby box and thanks us for driving the pirate off with a few rupees. He doesn't expand on what Jolene might want from him, and the story will have to wait for another day. After docking at Merkay Island, we arrive back at the Temple of the Ocean King and are forced to once again traverse through its upper floors. Our progress is aided this time by the collection of tools and treasures that we have accumulated so far in our travels, and it isn't long before we arrive back at the door that leads to the lower floors. We inscribe the crest of the Triforce on the door, and sure enough, when it opens, we're brought into an area that we haven't previously seen. These lower levels of the temple are massive and are populated not just by the run-of-the-mill phantoms that we've seen so far, but by swiftly moving red phantoms as well. Making things even more difficult are the addition of floors, which make a chime-like noise when we walk too quickly on them, and thus can alert nearby phantoms to our presence. All of our stealth skills are put to the test in order to reach our goal, and the Phantom Hourglass is running worryingly short on golden sand by the time we finally stand before a massive chest which holds the sea map to the southeastern Great Sea. We immediately set a course, and it isn't long before we've come upon a massive island populated by the towering Gorons. The Gorons are a polite, if slightly standoffish race, and they are slow to welcome us who they see as an outsider. A few questions here or there about the pure metals reveals that the Gorons are in possession of something like this, and so it seems that we may have stumbled upon one of the 3 tribes after all. Our investigation brings us to the home of the Goron elder, Big Goron, who confirms that the Gorons are in possession of the pure metal crimsonine, but they will not surrender it to an outsider. In order to become a full member of the tribe, we must spend time among the island locals, learn about them, and then report back to their chief. We spend a day wandering the island and socializing, meeting many Gorons, and even saving one from an attack by a horde of yellow chews. By the end of the day, we've learned enough about the Goron tribe to answer all of Big Goron's ridiculous questions, including how many Gorons are inside their homes versus outside, how many homes are on the island, and how many adults versus children there are. With this oddly specific test out of the way, we are officially members of the tribe and are able to pass by the Goron bouncer who guards the entrance to the side of the island where the Goron Temple resides. Big Goron bids his son, Goron, to help us to the temple and to claim the pure metal inside. We can barely keep up with Goron, however, and are forced to find our way through the canyon labyrinth, which leads into the temple. Once we finally set foot inside, Goron is nowhere to be seen, and we set about searching for the young Goron. Goron Temple is a maze scattered with impassable pits of quicksand and multiple Beamos statues. It takes what feels like forever to finally locate Goron, who has been captured and imprisoned behind an impassable wall and needs our help to escape. His captor is soon revealed in the form of a massive one-eyed Hinox that we must defeat. Our arrows are able to stun the creature and allow us to finish off the Hinox with some fierce blows from our sword. Goron is now able to leave his cell and proves to be very useful in gaining us access to new areas of the temple by activating switches which are out of our reach. Eventually, he leaves us to forage ahead and locate the pure metal. Feeling a bit annoyed about being left alone again, we proceed further into the temple and locate a cache of bomb chews, which can be remote controlled to activate tough-to-reach switches and enemies. With the explosive help of the bomb chews, we track down the big key and come at last to a massive open chamber, which is the home to the giant lizard Dongorongo. These names are really something. We are separated from the immense beast by a quicksand moat and are unsure of how to engage it in battle when Goron appears from a nearby hole in the wall and offers to try stunning the creature for us. Rolling around the arena and delivering quick attacks to Dongorongo's unprotected belly, Goron is able to stun the beast, and we follow up with a few well-placed bomb chews driven right into the creature's open mouth. The lizard seems defeated, and a door at the opposite end of the chamber opens up. Goron runs through the door, proclaiming that the pure metal is on the other side. We cross a newly formed bridge over the sandpit and try to follow the young Goron when the monstrous lizard wakes up again and attacks. It takes every ounce of agility we possess to dodge the creature's massive fireballs and to throw a few bombs down its throat, but in the end, it is finally vanquished and we proceed into the next chamber where Goron awaits us. The crimsonine is sitting on a pedestal and Goron bids us to take it, with a suggestion to come visit him and his father in the Goron village before we leave the island. With one of the 3 pure metals now in our possession, it feels that we have made real progress in our quest to defeat Bellum and to free the spirit of the Ocean King. This has been the plot recap as read by me. Let's get into part 2, which is our takes, where we talk about this section of the game and how it made us feel. And, you know, Josh, I just want to start off by saying that if the named characters in the next section of this game could have just like a few less consonants, that would be great, because Goron, Dongorongo, and Crimsonine, like just saying all 3 of those over and over is just it's a lot of syllables, really, is what it is.
Yeah, no, for sure. We can call the boss just Dawn.
I think Dawn the lizard.
The rock is just crimson.
I really think that would have been a little easier. And it's like it's so weird because you've got Gongoron and then Dongorongo, and I'm just not sure why those characters are named such similar things. They're not even like sort of similar critters, but these are small little gripes. But let's talk generally about this section of the game, and I'm going to send it to you first, Josh, and just ask you for some general thoughts and impressions about what how you feel about the things that we kind of get up to this week. Stating up front that I think last week with Cody, we mentioned that all the stuff with Zhao's and getting sent on the quest to find the Phantom Sword was maybe stuff that could have been better placed at the end of last week's chunk of things. But regardless, we did it this week.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like abruptly stopping right after you finish the ghost ship, when the story is kind of just starting to hit that point where, something new is starting and then you just quit when you're like right there next to his island and you could be there in 10 seconds. It is a little bit odd and probably isn't the best way to experience the game. I don't know how many people would do that just by choice, but that's just the way it works here. So, but yeah, I think it's interesting and a little different than most Zelda games, but I think it's interesting how our first quest was not about a sword and our second quest is. Skyward Sword has the same thing later, but I do like that. I think it's I feel like when I first went through the game, I almost just didn't expect a sword at all anymore. Having to go back to the Temple of the Ocean King is kind of just expected at this point. But I don't like this part of it.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Real quick to your observation about, the sword being in the second half of this game. Were you originally thinking, I guess, way back on your first playthrough that this might be a bit more of a Link's Awakening style thing where it's just like you've just got your main sword through most of it and you've got some optional upgrades to it, but it's not like narratively essential for you to be doing any of that?
Yeah, like it's at this point there would have been other Zelda games like that too. Granted, I'm talking about multiplayer games, but not every Zelda game focuses on a sword specifically, and so I just when in other games it's pretty quickly established that you need a sword frequently. Even I don't know if you've even played these games at all, so I don't want to say too much, but like in the Oracle games, like sometimes you don't even start with a sword. So it's like so a lot of times the games are very upfront about you need a sword and or you need a sword to kill the big bad, and this one's just not. It doesn't really come up. So it does kind of feel it's different, and I like that. It does feel kind of forced too, in that way. That it's just like, well, of course there's a big bad, and of course the only way to defeat him is with a magic sword.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
And of course it's not that convenient. You have to do something special to get it. But I doubt that I cared that much about that nearly 20 years ago. I had done it a lot fewer times 20 years ago also.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, this is, it's weird to think about our opinions of these games and the decisions that are made in them, like solidifying at the time and not just thinking about them as plot points in hindsight, Yeah. Definitely very different. But yeah, I definitely understand what you're saying. I do kind of, I like being sent on a quest to get a bigger and more badass piece of weaponry in Zelda games. It's always fun. But I definitely don't know if I consider it to be a thing that's essential to me having a good time in a Zelda game. So yeah, really could have gone either way with this one. And obviously I had no idea what to expect. So it was kind of a pleasant surprise, I guess, to me, seeing that was going to be the next step of this whole thing. But it kind of seems like the situation is going to be that we don't even really get that until basically the end of the game, right? Because our next step is to acquire materials to create the sword. And, that should take us right up until the very final, like going and defeating Bellum, essentially, is what it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to spoil all the things that happen, but you can look at the schedule.
Yeah, exactly
and
right.
And count the number of episodes and count how many things you needed to make a sword. So
kind of where I'm at with it right now. But we'll see how it unfolds. Let's talk about the Temple of the Ocean King. Let's go ahead and get that out of the way. we've spent a lot of time and a lot of words on it up until this point, but I do think it's good to sort of have a check-in on it a little bit now, because we do have a pretty major shakeup to the formula in a few different ways. One of those is a thing that Max was telling us was going to be happening pretty soon, which is a way to at least sort of minimize the annoyance of the temple in the form of the checkpoint mechanic that you kind of get here. Which is appreciated, right? Like I want to give credit where credit is due. It's a very nice thing to have. Going back through those first few floors, I mean, there's only so much enjoyment that you can really get out of trying to optimize your time in those with all the new items that you have. And I would say that it's not even that much to begin with. So getting this checkpoint mechanic is definitely pretty great. Do you feel like this was a good way to kind of alleviate that and I guess make it a bit more palatable going into the back half of the game?
Yeah, like it's better than nothing for sure. So I do like it, and I do like optimizing the route part of the time. One thing that bothers me is that I know that the item we get this week is used to optimize part of the route that you can now skip. So if you actually want the best time, you actually have to go do it again anyway.
Gotcha.
Usually okay. I don't bother as long as I haven't totally screwed it up. I think I got it done in like 3 minutes or something this time. So I'm kind of just happy with that. And if you spend any time looking for treasures or things like that, you can get more time for your hourglass anyway. So it's like, it's a good mechanic. I just kind of wish that by the time they had given you the shortcut that you were already capable of optimizing it, and you're not.
Yeah, for sure. And that is annoying just sort of in principle. I will say that I did do those first 3 or 4 floors twice this week. And I actually ended up doing it by choice. Like I went in and I would say that I got like a 6 minute or so clear the first time. And then when the checkpoint mechanic kicked in, it became clear that was like a pretty suboptimal run. And if I wanted to make life easier for myself going forward, it would probably be worth just, biting the bullet, going and doing it again, which I did. And then I hit somewhere in like the 3.5 minute range, which I'm pretty happy with, to be honest. So
yeah, that's pretty solid.
Yeah. And the thing is, I'm not sure exactly what to make of that, right? Because the Temple of the Ocean King has been, bar none, my least favorite part of this game so far. And I'm not sure what to do with the information that the game got me to willingly go do my least favorite part of my least favorite part again,
Yeah.
Little emotionally conflicted on that. But regardless, I did it. And yeah, I think it's a good mechanic overall. I will say that even though forced stealth mechanics, timers, and having to wait for enemies to pass very slowly, and all these things that we've been saying that we just don't like in principle, still don't like them. They're still not great. I do think that the arrangement of these lower floors, like once you actually get past the Triforce door, I do think that some of the puzzle solving that happens down there is just a bit more fun and a bit more well thought out and planned feeling to me. So yeah, I'm still not ready to say that I think the Temple of the Ocean King is a great thing or anything like that, but I do think that these harder, newer levels did have something going for them. I think there was a nice refinement of the formula there.
Yeah, like I agree that the specifically the excuse me. Specifically, the main puzzle of getting the triangle, circle, and square to the pedestals is a more thought out, smarter puzzle than just the kind of light these 2 torches, pull these 2 switches without getting seen by the Phantom, and rush over there, to get the key or whatever. However, they really didn't need to add the floors that yell at you.
Yeah. And, the thing about those is that they didn't actually result in me getting caught by a phantom ever. Like the radius that they seem to notice you walking, like the noise actually happening, is pretty small, which is nice. If it had been too big, that would have been really irritating. But what it actually kind of results in is like just a situation where you're having to walk slowly, and you're sort of doing it just because, and it's slowing down your progress, and there's not much like tension happening around it. It's just it's one extra thing that's causing you to go slower than you necessarily need to be. And when you have a timer ticking down, that's inherently not fun, I think.
Right. And then that lowest floor also introduces those little Grim Reaper guys, I don't know what they're called, who steal your time if they hit you also. So it's just like the entire dungeon from the beginning, and then getting worse as you go down, just stacks on more and more mechanics to make it not fun. And like, even if the floors don't result in you getting caught, it does slow you down. It is just another thing, because the reality is, like, I don't remember the last time I actually ran out of time. And, even if you run out of time, all that means is you take damage, right? You take damage if you are just wandering around without the timer. And if you get hit by a phantom, you lose time and have to restart the room. But it's like, I don't remember the last time that happened. The timer is just there to be stressful. It's just there to be annoying more than it is like actually limiting what you're doing. Which is the same like problem a lot of people cite about Majora's Mask, where Majora's Mask is too stressful to play because there is always a timer. And it doesn't matter how many times you say, well, the timer is actually like 3 hours and you can play a song to make it 6. It's just the presence of a timer at all. And so the dungeon doesn't need a timer.
No, definitely not. I do want to back up for 1 second, just say, and I know that this is not what you're saying, but Majora's Mask and the timer in the Temple of the Ocean King definitely kind of like apples to oranges in terms of.
Yes, it's not. It's not as basic a timer, right? It's a clock that. But that's how people feel about it. It's a thing that's just there, kind of in your face the whole time, and like, I think the Temple of the Ocean King would have just been better without the timer. It doesn't need the guys that steal your time. It doesn't need the floors that yell at you. It was already just a stealth dungeon at all. And that's enough.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And it's a stealth dungeon you have to repeat.
So should I be prepared to redo these floors the next time I come back in here again? I'm assuming that's going to be the case.
Yes, I was actually going to ask you if you saw the little hint here, because this might be a clue for listeners later, where again, the way that the pod is structured is a little bit suboptimal, because there is another portion of the temple, but unlike previous times, you are not locked out of it. You can actually do it back to back right now if you want to. The game gives you what you need to do it. And I actually did that completely on accident. I didn't finish it. I just saw. I was like, oh, I did it the right way. And so all it is, and there's just a little pedestal in the final room that tells you this, is like, you place the blocks in the pedestals in a certain order, and it makes the door go somewhere else.
Gotcha. I completely missed the hint, and it's probably for the best that I did, because I don't know. I feel like I would have been tempted to just go in and do it. And like you say, that would have broken our format here, which, for better or worse, is kind of messing with us in this game. But yeah,
a lot of guides will tell you to just get it over with, and then you still have to repeat it again later, but you have to do it one less time.
Right. Well, I mean, one less time in the Temple of the Ocean King is one less time in the Temple of the Ocean King, right? I mean, I feel like that's kind of.
I guess the counter argument is that when you come back later, you have more time in your hourglass than you would have before.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that is fair.
And you could optimize that first part of the route better. So
right, yeah.
But yeah, that is a tip that a lot of guides mention. is that you can do them both like that.
Okay, definitely something good to know for our listeners. If you haven't done this yet, then maybe just go and do that and save yourself some trouble later on. Because I guess at this point in the game, this is something that I was wondering: is the temple order completely linear from here?
I actually just learned this while I was reading up, kind of refreshing myself and getting some talking points tonight for notes. Apparently, Goron Temple is like it is, but the last two you can do in either order.
Okay,
and
gotcha.
I guess that is because you can go to the temple and finish the next part, which I don't think it's really a spoiler to say, like, it gives you the other chart that you're missing. So you're able to go to the rest of the ocean. And so you're actually not locked out of doing the last two in any order. But yeah, so it's not totally linear.
Okay, cool. Well, I mean, that's always a good thing to take note of. I think on principle, I'm always just generally fascinated with Zelda games when they choose to make that decision, right? Because having any element of choice is a lot of fun. And I think it's even more interesting when it's like when that's possible, but it's also not immediately obvious, or maybe even like intended. The one that I always kind of come back to is the whole Shadow Temple versus Spirit Temple thing in Ocarina of Time, right? Yep. Where like everybody just kind of considers Shadow Temple to be the one that comes before Spirit Temple, but you could technically do them in any order that you want.
Right. And you can actually, Ocarina of Time is pretty easy to break open if you're careful about what you do, or if you're willing to dive into a dungeon and grab an item, right?
Sure.
Like you need the bow to do a lot of things, but if you go get the bow, you can actually just head off to the water temple.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I like, you can do that. You can do a lot of stuff out of order. You can do the fire temple last pretty much, just period. Which is, you don't really need the Megaton hammer for required puzzles very much.
Yeah, definitely. One of the notable most useless items in all of Zelda history being the Megaton hammer. Yeah. But anyway, good to know about the linearity of the dungeons. But yeah, okay, so going back to the Temple of the Ocean King, I don't know that there's necessarily too much more to say about it unless you have something that you're just kind of burning to get off your chest. But I do think it is notable, just to put a cap on this whole end of the discussion, that even though, yes, still not a great thing in concept, you did find some silver linings of enjoyment here this week. Did Matt feel the same? Who's to say? Probably not, but we'll check in with him on it next week for sure.
I do have one other mechanic to add, but I do kind of agree. Like at the beginning of the game, it kind of feels like they throw you into this too quickly, and especially now when I revisit this game, I don't know, on average every 3 years or so, I replay it nowadays. I think I last played it in 2019, something like that, on the Wii U. And it's like you end up at it so soon, and it feels like you're just getting used to the controls, or even if you've played it before, you're just kind of getting readjusted to it. And they just immediately throw you into the stealth, everything kills you timer dungeon. And it just kind of makes you hate it right at the beginning. As you get a little bit further, I actually don't hate it as much. Like, I wish those floors didn't make that noise and there wasn't just more things to deal with. But like we've said, the puzzles are actually good, which kind of makes me upset because I wish they were in another dungeon. Like, I actually really like the puzzles we have in the last couple floors here. In particular, I wanted to note that the invisible floors, or the invisible path specifically, where what you're supposed to do is be watching the phantoms. Because you can see the phantom cross the floor. Like, you can stand there in the corner and actually watch them walk. But what the game kind of prompts you to do initially is to watch your map, where you can just see suddenly he floats from one side of the room to the other. And I really like that, especially when the rest of it feels like you just stand around and wait on the phantoms for no reason a lot.
Right.
And so instead, it's like they made a good use of it. I kind of wish they did it more. Kind of invisible floors are only so much fun. But I do like that mechanic. I think that was an interesting addition this week.
Yeah, so we keep comparing the Temple of the Ocean King to the Silent Realms in Skyward Sword, right? And I think in past weeks, I've kind of landed in a place where I felt like the Temple of the Ocean King was a net downgrade. Downgrade is kind of a misleading term because they existed before, but you know what I mean. I felt like I was liking the Temple of the Ocean King quite a bit less than the Silent Realms. And this week, I kind of feel like that's flipped a little bit for me. I feel like this iteration of the Temple of the Ocean King is actually maybe just a bit more fun than the Silent Realms. Just by virtue of the fact that, like we've said, there is actual puzzle solving happening in here, which is not a thing that really happens in the Silent Realms at all. So I think that's a big point in its favor, right? Because if you go back to our Skyward Sword season, Matt and I didn't necessarily hate the Silent Realms, right? And I was actually thinking about that a little bit over the last few days of like, well, we've been trashing the Temple of the Ocean King, but we weren't necessarily that negative about the Silent Realms. So like, what's the difference? Like, where does it lie, So
I generally don't like the Silent Realms. Which is weird because I don't fail them very often, right? It's just that feeling of it's constantly ticking down. I know if I get hit, I have to start over, and I don't want to do it again.
Right.
So I don't really like them. And here we also are missing a piece of the puzzle, being that I view the Temple of the Ocean King, the equivalent idea in Spirit Tracks and Skyward Sword, as being like the evolution of one idea, where they have seen what fans did not like about it and kind of tweaked it. You could even take it a step further to an extent and put A Link Between Worlds in there, because that's the first time they abandoned it. And they have that little stealth section outside the Dark Palace, and that is all. But for 5 years, basically, Zelda was all about these one-hit KO timer stealth things, and it just got it was just tiring. Like, we all hated this one, and then instead of just getting rid of it, they were like, well, we'll tweak it for you and do something different. And then when we still were not super thrilled with it, they were like, well, we'll tweak it again and still give it back to you. And so the Silent Realms, to me, are the best version because they're not full of puzzles. They don't take very long. They are just, here's a room, go grab the stuff and don't get hit. And it's like, there's a couple like push the block to get the tier or whatever. But yeah, here it's very much a full-fledged dungeon. And it is better in some ways when you get a highlight like the puzzles this week. But I feel like Skyward Sword's version was specifically a reaction to what players did not want.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. Definitely something that I'm happy did not carry forward into, let's say, like the Breath of the Wild era of Zelda, at least in any way that I can really think of. So
notably, there's very little stealth stuff going on, right? Unless it's optional. Wear the stealthy clothes. You get an occasional little escorty thing, but not very much of it. So
yeah, you have to escort a Korok through the Korok forest to a shrine or whatever.
I was thinking more like the Yunobo part going up the mountain, but yeah.
Oh God! I mean, yeah, that was even. I mean,
you can launch that Korok on a raft or whatever and get him through that forest.
It's true. It's true. These things are all possible. Not something you can do in the Temple of the Ocean King, notably. Okay, but let's move on to talking a little bit more about this section of the game after we get out of the Temple of the Ocean King, because to me, this is, I said earlier that I wanted to have a follow-up discussion about how we delineate, like, is it an overworld? Is it a bit more something in the style of what Zelda 2 is doing? And it's really difficult for me to put an actual label on. This week we unlock another quarter of the map. And at this point we have a decent chunk of world to sort of move around in and explore, right? Everything feels kind of opened up a little bit. So I kind of want to ask you, Josh, which thing do you feel like it falls more to one side of? Because you were saying earlier that you had always considered this to be a pretty in step with what Wind Waker is up to. I still feel like the miniaturization of all of these things is maybe causing it to veer a little bit more towards what's happening in Zelda 2. That's just me.
Yeah, and like a part of my the way I view it is based on just my past history with gaming. Like, you all had surprised me when the Zelda 2 Overworld was foreign to you, because I grew up playing tons of games that had something just like Zelda 2. Things that predated Zelda 2, things that were using them 10 years after Zelda 2 came out. You know, even like Final Fantasy 7, has an overworld like that. And so to me, that was just how games worked. So it's hard for me to look at a game like Phantom Hourglass and say its overworld is like Zelda 2, because it feels a lot more like an open world to me, even if the islands themselves are locked behind a loading screen and are miniaturized technically on the overworld map. It feels much more like a big open 3D space to explore than any top-down game really does, with an overworld like that, where like we're comparing. There's a big rock in the water that's roughly the shape of the island we're going to go to there's a 16 by 16 sprite of a town.
Sure.
And
yeah.
To me, it's just two completely different approaches to how an overworld works. I also feel like it's slow to start in this, but there's a lot of extra stuff you can do in the overworld now, as far as the salvage game, attacking enemies, the pirate stuff with Jolene or just other pirates that come after you, the little travelers' boats, and just extra islands to find, right?
A person who felt like extending the argument could say that Zelda 2 also had all of those things in the form of random field encounters and hidden patches of grass that contained fountains and everything.
I need counterpoint.
Yeah, I need to stress that this is just me continuing the discussion for the sake of continuing the discussion. But like, I do think so. If you remove the fact that you've remove some of the old school Japanese RPG trappings of the Zelda 2 overworld, and I do think that they do become similar situations, right? Like you have a lot less freedom of movement in the Phantom Hourglass Great Sea. It's peppered by random combat encounters that are a different format than necessarily anything else in the game. You are acquiring abilities that are allowing you to get to new areas of the map in the overworld setting, right? Like once you get the cannon and everything, then you can clear away rocks and you can get to a new area. That was something that happened like with the hammer in Zelda 2, right? I don't think it's one-to-one. I'm not trying to make that argument. But I do think that it maybe has a little bit more direct lineage there than is, than one could notice on first glance. But for the sake of the discussion, let's say that it is an overworld. It's not in the Zelda 2 style. It is an overworld in the traditional Zelda sense. Do you think it's a good one?
It's as good as Skyward Swords.
Well, okay. Well, all right.
I'm not. That's not meant to be super mean to Matt. But like Skyward Swords overworld is just referring to the sky, right? Is pretty sparse, right? And sure. I think it's the same way here. There is stuff to do, maybe about as much stuff to do as there is in Skyward Sword, even if it's just not as upfront about it. And part of that's because Skyward Sword is so tutorial heavy. It's like you're not making it to Skyview Temple without knowing what a goddess cube and a goddess chest are. And here you can totally ignore the salvage game if you don't want it. Like, you have to do it once to get the key you need, but like you can just ignore it. And honestly, a lot of my playthroughs, I do ignore it. A lot of my playthroughs, I don't bother with the salvage. I don't bother with ship parts. I don't bother even with getting the fast travel. Because, and I say a lot of playthroughs, probably my last 2 playthroughs, because I was mostly interested in just seeing what the dungeons were like again and just getting through the game. So you can just easily ignore a lot of it. And I don't know how easily you ignore it in Skyward Sword to the same extent, but it's fine. I do like it. I was going to say I disagree with you on the idea that you have less freedom of movement. I understand that there is that like hard Metroidvania lock of you need bombs to go here, and you have to do the dungeon and get the map before you can sail further, which is silly and kind of arbitrary. And also maybe just the same idea of Nintendo didn't want people to get lost.
Well, so actually, and I need to clarify too. When I was talking about less options or less range of movement, I was talking more about the way that you actually move when you're in this overworld,
and that's
right. Like
that's what I was going to say. Like, I actually disagree, because you can actually just sit there and do whatever you want and scribble it on the screen. And remember, at this point in history, there was no Wind Waker HD. There was no Swift Sail. In the Wind Waker, you go one direction. And if you want to go another direction, you stop completely, and then you play the Wind Waker and you change the direction you're going.
That's a very good point.
Or you use the fast travel to get around, which is what most people would do, right? You find the closest point and accidentally hit Child and Mother Island over and over and over again. And then you go one direction to get to whatever the nearest place you wanted to be at is, and you still have that here. It's not as given to you up front. You have to work for fast travel in this game. But
yeah, and you're absolutely right. Like my opinion was heavily influenced by the Wind Waker HD Swift Sail element of doing things. So that definitely needs to be said. It's a good call out. So in your mind, they're roughly equivalent things to Skyward Sword, with the sky and the Great Sea being similar experiences, and then the islands and the pre-dungeons being similar experiences, and then of course dungeons are just dungeons. Is that about the measure of it?
Yeah, I mean the pre-dungeon part of Phantom Hourglass, I don't know how equivalent it is to Skyward Sword in particular. I mostly just meant the sky.
Yeah,
like that you could replace the clouds with the ocean, and it really wouldn't be all that different.
Yeah.
And turn the bird into a boat. You wouldn't have the loading screen when you want to play a mini game on Bamboo Island, right? Like there would be a little bit of difference because of the technology difference, but the concept is really not that different to me.
Yeah. Okay. And I think that's a totally fair call out. I will say, as somebody who has not been enjoying the Great Sea and Phantom Hourglass a ton in this playthrough, I think, this is purely just enhancement by volume, right? But like just the addition of more things, it does nothing but help. It is nice to have extra places to go. I am keeping slight track of things like treasure maps, doing the salvage minigame, and all of that stuff. And, checking in with Jolene and tracking down those traveler boats and all of those things. So like, I am finding things to do and ways to spend my time. I still don't think that any of these are things that I would be putting in like the absolute top tier of Zelda activities, but it does give the world a feeling of life and of being lived in, right?
Right. Like, you have to wonder how much of it is a technical limitation, right? As far as like how many things they could fit. Like I will say, like to anyone listening or to you, do not ever try to get all of the ship parts. Just don't do that to yourself. Do the Koroks in Breath of the Wild like a dozen times before you do the ship parts. Just don't. So like I think that's actually a pretty big negative, is that just the ship parts are just not worth the effort. And it's not really fun to do, I don't think. And that's supposed to be like a big side quest of getting all the ship parts. I do think the mini games are fun. Y'all talked about the cannon game and the archery game. And And then Jolene is a cool character. The little traveler ships are cool. So like I think most of the stuff is good, but I think the one they really want you to do is the ship parts, and it's just not worth it.
I have been so wildly unmotivated to mess with that. Like I could not be less interested in it. I've gotten one or two ship parts just on accident, and every single time I've just kind of thought to myself, all right, well, there's something, you know.
You did remind me something I don't think has been mentioned at all so far in the season is there are no pieces of heart.
Are there not? I feel
there are a few heart containers, but there are like the equivalent of Zelda and Zelda 2 numbers of heart containers. Very, very few. But the pieces of heart home mechanic is just not there.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that's good to know because I came across, I think it was Beetle, but like wearing his helmet, you know?
Yes. He's got one to sell.
Okay. And I didn't buy it at the time because I thought at the time that it was just a quarter of a heart piece. And had I known that it was going to be an entire other heart container, I might have actually pulled the trigger on it. So very good to know. Weird departure. I mean, this is fairly far down the stream of Zelda games that have all done the 4 or 5 heart piece mechanic, right? So
yes, Twilight Princess had 5 pieces of heart to get a heart container.
Yeah,
but that again may be Nintendo saying that's too hard. We need it to be easy, so everybody can do it. So we're not going to. So they didn't make side quests that you needed to do to get more health very much, and when you did, you got 4 times the reward.
Okay. Odd. But yeah, like I said, good to know. A few fun locations that we do get to this week. Goron Island, I think, is actually a kind of fun little place. I think I was really, I was taken by the novelty of seeing Gorons in the Wind Waker style, which is something that with one exception, maybe 2 exceptions, we didn't really see Gorons in Wind Waker, right?
Right.
And so it's fun to see them here as like a civilization, and even from like a narrative standpoint of having an answer to like, oh, what happened to the Gorons after Hyrule was flooded, right? It's like, well, they relocated here.
No, they're traveling merchants on rafts.
Yeah, exactly. I thought they were pretty fun as characters. They're written sort of interestingly. I feel like from a personality standpoint, they're written quite a bit differently than Gorons typically are in the Zelda series. Like, whereas they're usually kind of like very goofy characters, here they're just a bit more self-serious. But, you know, we have a very typical Zelda interaction in the form of like, you need the help of a Goron Elder to acquire a thing. So that felt very Ocarina of Time. It's hard for me to knock them for their just complete repeat of the Ocarina of Time Goron City soundtrack. Because it gets used in like a lot of games, you know, but it is just like one more instance of something we were talking about last week where it's like, I really wish this game had more of its own original music.
Yeah. I do actually really like the Murkay Island theme. But that and Linebeck is basically what I remember from this game. But it is nice that they bring back. I noticed the Goron song immediately. How do you not? But it's nice that they reuse all that stuff. But it's interesting that they made those decisions because they definitely did not make those decisions for the next few Zelda games.
Right. No. Or at least from what I obviously I haven't played Spirit Tracks, but you're correct insofar as I'm aware, like the games that I've played. So
Spirit Tracks is actually rather highly regarded for its music, and nobody talks about Phantom Hourglass.
Yeah, at all ever. How do you feel about the Gorons as characters here?
Oh no, I like it a lot. I like Gongoron a lot. Even though he's a jerk. I really like Gongoron. I think that the actual interaction with them is interesting. I'm glad I remembered it ahead of time. Not that I remembered all the details, but I remembered to take notes. that's not very clear that you need to be doing that at the beginning unless you've played it before. And even then, I only remembered because the very first Goron on the island that I talked to said something about needing to meet everyone, and just kind of was ringing those bells that I needed to take notes of which ones are adults and which ones are children, and so on. I ended up taking the wrong notes, though, and taking notes I did not need at all. I started noting how many rocks were in each house. I also noticed there was a spot with 4 pots, and I noted that. I wrote down how many children there were, just in general, and the question was how many adults are outside.
So, yeah, I was gonna say it really set you down the bloopiest of bloopy trails.
Yeah, but it is just one of those things where they really wanted you to do the drawing on the map. They want you to just make all sorts of notes,
which is kind of like I'm of two minds about that. I think as far as the quiz is concerned, right? I don't think that it is necessarily a bad thing. I think that it's the kind of thing that might annoy some people, just because it's, these are things like these are metrics that aren't inherently interesting to be paying attention to, right? And so needing to and then having to answer them and then having like a fail state where if you answer one wrong, then it bounces you out of the game, whatnot. Like I can see that all being kind of annoying, but at the same time, that's pretty typical puzzle game stuff. So like I'm willing to allow it. I do wish that there was just some slight hint out and about town in regards to like what specific questions might be asked. And maybe they are there and maybe it's just a little bit more between the lines and I just wasn't paying attention.
I would say they're not there. Okay. Like the main thing I had remembered was that you needed to talk to everyone. The first Goron says that, says introduce yourself to everyone. So I remembered that. And then someone else said, oh yeah, the chief loves quizzes. And then I remembered, oh yeah, I'm going to have to, there's a test. I need to start thinking about it a little more. And so I started like putting dots on my map of where all the Gorons were, because I just something in my head was like, I need to know how many of these there are, don't I? So like, I like it. And I think again, I'm very much keep going back to like where Nintendo's mindset was in this DS era of trying all sorts of new things. This is a very like point and click adventure kind of segment of you need to go into all of these rooms and take notes of what all the details are, and then later you're going to need that info to solve a puzzle. Putting it into just kind of an arbitrary the chief has a quiz for you is a little silly and not something that a more serious point and click adventure would do. It would be something more important than that. But the idea of you need to be taking notes and keeping track of things is interesting, and it uses the DS in a way that like they really wanted you to be doing in a lot of games, like because traditionally what you would do is have Notepad open on your computer or have a sheet of paper to write all of this down.
Sure.
Which you could still do. but they really just wanted you to be drawing on it. And even I have to get out of that mindset of only drawing certain things on the map. Like I encountered a side quest or someone told me to go get something for them, and I ended up just writing it on the C chart. I need this item. And that's not really how maps are used in most games.
No, it's not. But in fairness, I think that this game really does kind of, it seems like it wants you to be doing that. And I think the way that I tend to think about using maps and annotation in this game is more like symbolic, right? Or like specific to each puzzle, where it's like you have like this many switches and you need to number the switches and do them in a specific order, right? It's a lot less of just like me taking what you would consider actual notes, right? So I do think yeah, when you kind of talk about it that way, it does make this whole quiz thing just a little bit more inherently uninteresting. Not that it was like super interesting to begin with. I do appreciate that Ciela gives you a little heads up once you've actually spoken to all the Gorons in town. I was really worried it was going to be one of those things where I had to because what I did was I thought that I already had. And then I went to talk to Big Goron, and he was still just like, "You're not one of us yet. You could go find somebody else." And so I'm going around talking to people. I was just like, I don't remember if I talked to this one yet. Did I talk to this one yet? I don't know. I was like, I'm gonna have to go talk to each one individually, and then go back to Big Goron and see if I cleared it right. But once I got the one that I had missed, Ciela was like, "Oh, hey, congrats, you have all of them now." It's like, good, thank you. That's like 5 back and forth trips from his house to town that I no longer need to make.
Yeah, no, I forgot that she did that until she did it for me. You don't even have to go to the chief first to get that notification.
Yeah.
Which
is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Doesn't make a whole lot of sense just on the face of things, but again, great. I appreciate in a game where we kind of keep knocking how much it goes out of its way to be helpful to you, this is one of the ways that I think is actually an appropriate way to do that, right? It's not like calling out the specific solution to a puzzle or anything, but it's something that eliminates frustration in the completion of a menial task, right?
Right.
And I'll always take those.
But no, I agree. But I think the quiz is it's a silly quiz. But I do like the Gorons overall. We're going to talk about Gongoron more later. But I do like him very much. I think the puzzle here is fine. The little maze on the north end of the thing is fine.
Well, and one thing yeah, sure. One thing I do want to say about that maze on the north end too, real quick, before we get out of this section and get into the dungeon map, is talking about ways in which sometimes just the way that the map is drawn up and represented reminds me of Zelda 2. That north maze area really does kind of feel like Zelda 2 Death Mountain, when you just look at it on the map.
That did occur to me actually when I got to it. Just saw it for a second. I was like, someone's going to say something about Zelda 2.
It's you got to be really clear about this. I do not think that it was equivalent experience to Zelda 2's Death Mountain. Very, very clear about that. But no, it's just kind of, tickled something in the back of my brain where I was like, ooh, I've seen something like that before. That's fun. So let's get out of part 2 and get on into part 3, which is the dungeon map, where we talk about this week's dungeon from mechanics to music and more. This week's dungeon is the Goron Temple. And I just want to say that I feel like a broken record at this point. I feel like we've been saying this week over week in this game. But I felt like, once again, this dungeon was a really fun experience, which has become the norm for this game. And, I really do get the feeling that this was a team that was very confident in its ability to make interesting dungeon experiences. Did you feel pretty similarly?
Yes. No, I generally agree with you that the not Ocean King dungeons of this game are probably its best feature. So yes, I think the Goron dungeon is great. It's probably one of the better ones in this game.
Yeah, I do think that it does suffer from a pretty samey look and feel and vibe to all the other dungeons that we've been in, right? Which all just have kind of like a generic ocean cave sort of theme to them. I know we said that last week or the week before. We're not really getting a fire dungeon or a forest dungeon or any different, I guess, biomes within our dungeons so far.
Right, it's really more about the traps, right? And in that case, this is a sand dungeon.
Yeah,
but yeah, the Phantom Hourglass, and honestly, I can't recall Spirit Tracks are not. They're not super detailed in their spaces.
Yeah, at least here it feels appropriate though, right? Because again, this is like the Goron dungeon. This is the Goron Island. This sort of environment just kind of feels like something that we're pretty accustomed to getting with the Goron culture. There's no fire, but it still feels a little Dodongo's Caverny to me, which is appropriate. I think that works in its favor. Just from a layout perspective, so I'm going to do that thing that we've been doing the last few weeks where we sort of just describe what this dungeon is and the way that it works. It is a multi-level dungeon, pretty linear in the way that you progress from one area to the next. It's got a bunch of sand pits that are scattered all around the place. The sand pits you're not able to walk over. There's no mechanic that allows you to walk over them. If you walk on a quick sand pit, then you fall in and you lose some hearts. So that's kind of the main obstacle that you're sort of working against. The dungeon leverages a lot of puzzles where you've got multiple enemies that are kind of sandwiched between a bunch of sand pits, and it asks you to kind of be like pushing an Armos around to push on a switch or something like that. And so what that translates into is situations where you're in narrow little corridors, basically trying to solve a weight switch puzzle, and you're getting attacked by Beamos and other enemies, and you can't really go anywhere because you've got quicksand on either side. Which makes the dungeon feel a little bit more claustrophobic than its layout would actually suggest. Let's see. Some of the main enemies that you're going to find in here, like I said, are Beamos for one. Hinox make their debut in this dungeon. And I actually really like this game's take on the Hinox. It's an enemy that is new to this game and was not present in Wind Waker, but they still have a very Wind Waker style. And so I've kind of been a sucker for that in this game. Is like whenever there's a classic Zelda enemy that's like was not in Wind Waker but is here in that style, and now you know what it looks like. I really like that, and I think the Hinox have a really cool visual treatment to them. Midway through the dungeon, the item that you get is the bomb chews. The way the bomb chews work in this game is that you can use the stylus to draw a path that the bomb chew will follow, and then the back half of the dungeon opens up when you're able to use that in order to activate switches that are out of reach. And then you also are able to leverage the abilities of Goron, who becomes your sidekick character, and you can switch back and forth between your perspective and his, kind of like the Dominion Rod, and you can kind of use his abilities to solve puzzles that Link can't reach. The dungeon ends with a boss fight against what is basically King Dodongo reborn, and you've got to use bomb chews and bombs together in conjunction with switching back and forth between yourself and Goron to beat the boss. So that is the Goron Temple experience. So let's pull back into our specific discussion of some things that are happening in this dungeon. What did you think of some of the puzzles here? Like I think one thing that's kind of neat about this is that just on paper, most of what's happening is, like I said, weight switches and switch activation, which sounds like pretty early Zelda game dungeon stuff. But the way that it's done here is, I don't know, it definitely feels like a bit more skill is kind of required to pull some of these things off than it would just, than just saying it like that would imply.
Yeah, some of the puzzles like just require some specific timing, but also it's all about using the DS's features and how the stylus controls for the items work to explore those same basic concepts in just a different way, right? Hitting two switches is one thing, but you've never hit two switches by having a remote control bomb that you get to draw a specific path for. Like, even when you've had a remote control bomb in the past, they went in a straight line, not in a spiral.
Yeah. Yeah. And to that point, can we just say that I think this game's version of bomb chews probably are the version to beat in regards to the entire history of that item in the Zelda series. Like, to me, bomb chews have always kind of been an item that was cool in theory, but was never really a whole lot of fun to use, especially in Ocarina and Majora, right? Where they're kind of imprecise and they're honestly more of a pain than they are fun. in this game, they are just they are powerful. Like being able to precisely control where they go, I think is just a lot of fun. Like this is just a really, really excellent way to pull this item into this game and to make stylus controls kind of help it pop off.
Yeah, like this is what Bombchus like wanted to be. And to that point, like Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask are actually the like primary sources of Bombchus. Twilight Princess has a kind of equivalent item. And Bombchus do technically appear as an optional fun thing, I think, in one of the Oracle games. But like this is the only time where the Bombchus become like an actual practical puzzle solving tool. Yes, it is the one to beat. I think it's actually still the last time they've appeared. I don't remember if they're in the other game or not. But yeah. I think the Bombchus here are great. One of the best items in the game, and like make the case for why you need stylus controls in the first place.
Yeah, I think that that shouldn't be all that surprising, given that all of our pros for the stylus controls at this point have really come down to the way that they're implemented for the items, right? I think I at least have gotten to a point where I am no longer saying that I actively dislike stylus controls just for movement and combat. I feel pretty neutral on it at this point. It's neither my, well, I was going to say it's neither my favorite nor least favorite way to control Link in a Zelda game, but if this isn't my least favorite, then I'm not sure what is. But
side-scrolling Link.
I guess maybe, but like anyway, back it up a bit. I don't actively hate using the stylus controls for movement, but every time we get a new main item, I find myself thinking like, yes, this, like you were saying, this is why you make this decision. Like this is where it really pays off for you in terms of fun factor, because now like we've got the boomerang, we've got the precision bombs, we've got the bow and arrow, and we've got the Bombchus, and all of those items are notably better for having stylus controls than not, which I think is really impressive. Like I do think, it must be said that like that is a success for this method of doing things.
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting that even something as simple as the bow just feels better to play this way than to like use it in A Link Between Worlds, where trying to hit stuff is just, you have to line it up perfectly. You have to be positioned exactly right. And here you have full 360-degree movement to just fire off arrows rapidly.
Yeah, they do have a bit of a travel time, which does make it a little difficult at times. I do find myself wishing that the arrows themselves moved just a little faster. Very minor gripe, right? Like it's still just a ton of fun to use. And I was honestly, one of the things that I was struck with going back to the Bombchus is there were a few puzzles where it took me a second to figure out exactly how to solve it. Like I'd already used the Bombchus. I knew what I could do with them, but the destination point for the Bombchu, like I'm thinking of the one where you have to hit two switches at the same time, right?
Yep.
And it's like you have to make that Bombchu go a long way in order to solve that puzzle. So long to where it didn't immediately click for me that like that's what I was supposed to do. But then I was like, well, why wouldn't it be? This game has never said like you've got like a range for your Bombchus, but they go for a long time.
Yeah, they'll go for a long time. And like that puzzle, I know which puzzle you're talking about, is interesting specifically because the game is teaching you without showing you a tutorial screen that you can keep moving Link while the Bombchu is going. Because most of the time the camera follows the Bombchu so you can see what it's doing, but you need to be there to swipe that crystal switch at the exact same time as the Bombchu hits. So you've got to click away to be ready to do that.
I do think that was not maybe as clearly explained as it could have been.
It's not. It's not, and that's part of what's interesting to me is that in this era of hand-holdiness, they didn't hold your hand on that at all.
Yeah. I don't want to say that it annoyed me or anything, but it did take a little bit of like fiddling to kind of get to, I guess, commit it to muscle memory. is the best way to put it. But I do think it's really nice that you kind of have the option of doing one or the other. I think that makes for a good overall experience. And then, the crazy thing is that so we've got one level of complexity in this dungeon, which is the addition of bomb chews. And then we have a completely second one, which is throwing Gongoron and his whole suite of abilities on top of all of that. And I do want to say that it's maybe not quite as impactful when we're talking about Gongoron, just because, there is not too much of the overall dungeon that you're actually doing that for. I was definitely kind of thinking that this was maybe going to be a thing that was going to happen for the remainder of the dungeon after it happened that first time. And that was not the case.
Yeah, I had actually forgotten how little you get to control him. I remembered that he helped you in the boss fight. I had actually forgotten how much he helped you in the boss fight as being like the primary thing you control in the boss fight. Yeah. I had forgotten that, but I had forgotten how little of the dungeon you get to control him in. But I do really like it. It's very rare for a Zelda game to let you control anyone other than Link, especially in a dungeon like this. And I very much like it here. I think it's just another win in the column for this dungeon. Just having Gongoron at all, even if it is kind of simple. This particular puzzle setup where Gongoron has to hit a switch so Link can hit a switch so Gongoron can hit a switch is again I don't know why Majora's Mask keeps coming up so much in this episode, but there is a similar segment in Majora's Mask.
Yes, there is.
Two characters, and you are literally just one character do a thing to hit a switch, the other character do a thing to hit a switch, and it's the same idea here. Notably, no boss fight in that one.
No, there's not, and it is only one very small slice of that game, but it is a notable one. Can't wait to remember it, or can't wait to see if I remember us having this conversation when we get to that point in Majora's Mask. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I do think it's cool because I think this is a good example of a way that Phantom Hourglass actually improved on the way that Wind Waker handled a similar thing, where you're not even necessarily comparing Gongoron's abilities to Medley's or Makar's. I think he's better than Makar and not quite as good as Medley. But just the way in which you activate that transition from one character to the next is so smooth. In Wind Waker, you had to kind of stop down and play the song, and then there's a cut scene and all these things. And it's just so seamless here. The fact that it takes no time at all to do eliminates any inconvenience around this at all.
Right. No. And I had not even thought to compare it to the Wind Waker's characters, but Gongoron is fully fledged even more so than they are, in that he can just straight up attack enemies. And you have to. For a minute, I was like, oh, I have to dodge all these enemies down. And then before I realized I could just kill them.
Well, not only can he attack all those enemies, but you also share a health meter with him.
Right.
So, definitely an evolution on the partner character mechanic. And I thought, I really did think that it was very well done. And the only way it really could have been better is if you just kind of spent more time doing it. But it's tough to ask for that, because I do think that this dungeon wasn't short, right? I mean, I would say I spent 30-ish minutes in here, maybe 35 or so. And in a top-down Zelda dungeon, I feel like much longer than that is actually pretty abnormal.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a good solid dungeon, just like it is. I wish there was a little more Gongoron. He runs off, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to go down these stairs, and he's going to meet me, and just be on the other side of the room or something, and that just doesn't happen. But it's not really a big knock against the dungeon in any way, because you just spend the rest of the dungeon doing bomb troop puzzles instead.
Which are fun.
Right.
Yeah. Let's move on to talking about the boss. So am I pronouncing this right? Is it Dongorongo?
I need to look it up on the screen again.
Dongorongo?
Dongorongo. I would have said Dongo Rongo, right? almost like Bongo Bongo, but it's Dongo Rongo.
Yeah, or
There's
King
no space
Dodongo,
there.
right?
Yeah. For
Yeah.
some reason, it's not just Dodongo.
Well, because that's what it is, right? It's King Dodongo. It's like, actually, when you break this fight down, it is a more fun version of the King Dodongo fight from Ocarina of Time.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, because like you have a very similar situation where it's, bombs down the hatch, right? But you've got an inherently more interesting way to accomplish that because you have to collaborate with Gongaron to make it happen, which is really fun. But then in the second phase, you're doing, basically exactly what you're doing in Ocarina of Time, where it's just Link versus the big lizard. But it's more fun and interesting than that because you've got other enemies. You've got like Dongarongo's got a full range of motion around the arena. He's shooting fireballs at you. He has several different attacks. So it really is actually. I would say it's maybe the most hectic boss fight that we've gotten in this game so far.
Yeah, it can be if you let the enemies get out of control. You kind of have to stop what you're doing and make sure you're taking care of all the little guys. Otherwise, it can become pretty crazy pretty quickly.
Yeah, which I was definitely not doing as good a job at as I maybe should have been. So I had a purple potion. I actually did die in this boss fight. I had that handy dandy purple potion, and so no game overs were had. But it was definitely kind of out of sight, out of mind as far as Link when I was in Gongaron's body and vice versa. So
yeah, because it's like a totally different way of thinking about a boss fight. Like off the top of my head, I cannot think of another boss fight in any Zelda game where you have to do this. So the idea that you need to pay attention to two characters to keep your one life bar up is unusual. But it works really well.
It does. It does. I'm trying to figure out how I feel about this from the perspective of using both screens. I do, obviously it's still a really great use of that whole mechanic. And we've been saying for several weeks how the boss fights keep doing that really well and having good, cool uses of both screens to kind of try and defeat the boss. I do think this one is maybe just a smidge and less exciting at base for me because it is all taking place on one perspective. Whereas, past boss fights have been like, it's up in the sky and you're on the ground or whatever. I don't think that there's really much of a criticism to be had here other than that, just because like what you're doing is still super fun and that you're kind of controlling two characters at a time, which is great. But
right. And I think this goes back to, the same idea that the first boss had, which I think was kind of missed by everyone, where you had to boomerang the guy together in the correct order. Like the top screen is your map still, and is supposed to be there to just warn you that something's coming after Link. Like that's its primary purpose, to just give you a bird's eye view over the whole battlefield without having to constantly swap between the two. So I think that's probably why that decision was made. I like the two screen fights, but it is nice to get a mixture.
Well, and later in the fight too, it does kind of serve to let you know which direction Dongarongo's mouth is pointing, so that you can drive the Bombchu into it.
Right.
Which is helpful for sure. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like everything about this was done very well. It's a super competent use of both screens to make sure that you get through this boss fight and to give you all the information that you need. But it is just because it isn't quite as flashy as some other things. Maybe it didn't stand out to me quite as much as being like, oh yeah, that was really well done or whatever. But it was really well done. I definitely don't want to take anything away from it. Let's see. So I will say that using Gongaron and his combat abilities to fight the boss was maybe just a little bit less fun than I would have liked. I think it's a little difficult to know exactly the right way to be moving around the boss in order to attack his weak points and then stun him. Did you kind of have the same experience?
Not especially, but only because I was just like, I didn't know exactly how to hit the boss at first, but once I figured out it was the side, I just hit him in the side. And I don't, maybe there's more to it than that, but I thought I was just hitting him.
I don't know if there is. I think some of this is just me still being a little clumsy with this whole control scheme. Like I'm not. This is one of the reasons that I've actually been not doing as well in the Temple of the Ocean King. Like just the moving around is something that has been a little bit less precise for me than it probably should be. Like I'm just not comfortable with it. And so, yeah, I do think that somebody who's actually more skilled is probably just doing this with ease, and it's not taking them any effort at all. That's the read I've sort of got on it.
Yeah, I mean, the game is constantly teaching you extra things to do. While you're also still moving around. And I do agree with you and Matt's assessment that like trying to fight things while also trying to move is probably the worst part of the controls. As long as things don't get too crazy, I think it works really well. But like when those two Zora warriors or whatever they are show up is like, it's too much at once.
Yeah, definitely. Do you have anything else that you want to say about this dungeon before we move on out of part 3?
I think I'm set.
Okay, good stuff. Well, then let's go ahead and get into part 4, which is Bloopy Trails, where we talk about interesting things that diverted our attention this week. Josh, you're the guest, so I'm going to let you go first.
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that a lot of times I don't do very many extra things in this game. But I actually did. I went out of my way to check out a bunch of stuff that I had not done, and actually even learned some new things, maybe. So first thing that I did is I was desperately trying to get 10 powered gems so that I could go upgrade my sword ability. Well, so that I could activate the Spirit of Power and get fire on my sword. And for the longest time, I could only get to 9. I found my 10th one just outside the dungeon after I had given up. And then I actually left and I left the Goron Island and went to go get the upgrade so that I would have it. It's not like super noticeable or anything, but it, I think, does more damage. Like, I think it is just straight up a sword upgrade.
Are there more than 10? Because I did not get the one outside the Goron Temple, but I still had 10. And was
there's definitely more than 10. I don't remember what the other upgrades might be, but I believe there are, unless it's just like, now you do even more damage with more fire. But there are definitely more than 10 to do. And that's that's a side quest that is fun and worth doing, even as from just a Zelda completion standpoint, that's not finding all the ship parts. Like finding all the gems it is worthwhile. I also unlocked the frog fast travel stuff, which I had partially forgotten how it worked. I remembered the frogs were there, but I forgot about drawing the patterns because I've skipped doing it. The last probably both last times I played it, I just had not bothered. Because if you're going through the game pretty linearly, there's not a lot of backtracking. You don't really need to teleport around the world map very much. But I really like it, and I guess I don't think we've explained. Have you unlocked this?
Yes. So I unlocked it this week. I don't have any of the fast travel points unlocked yet. Okay. I just have the ability to, because like, of course, as soon as I got this unlocked and had the ability to do it, I stopped seeing frogs. Like I've seen them all over the place, like before this, but now they're nowhere.
When I decided that I was going to make sure I did that before this episode, I started marking on the map when I saw a frog. So I've only picked up 2 at this point. But the way it works is you have to shoot the frog with your cannon. And then it's a kind of comparable to the fishmen in the Wind Waker in that they'll tell you, well, here's what you need to do to come back here. It's on a map, but they give you a symbol to draw on your Game Boy Advance cartridge, which is what that tablet is.
Why in the world is it a Game Boy Advance cartridge? That's so weird.
I don't know, but that's what it is. And then of course what you're supposed to do is like draw the symbol on your map so that you have the markings on your C chart for what you need to do to teleport to each section. And they're simple little drawings, and that's another that's kind of another recurring DS trick that the devs of this game learned from the 3 years of DS development beforehand. And also reminds me, and this kind of is for the hourglass and the Triforce on the door too, reminds me of Skyward Sword when you have to swing the Wiimote in certain ways to seal the imprisoned again.
Oh, yeah, sure.
That seems kind of like an evolution of the idea of like needing to draw symbols for things. And in that case, of course, it's like some like magic arcane seal. And there are just straight up DS games where you're a wizard and have to draw a seal.
Yeah, sure.
Actually, I think there's a Castlevania game where you have to draw like to kill the vampires or whatever. You have to draw seals like that.
I would say that feels just a little bit more fictionally appropriate than kind of what's happening here, but like where it's just kind of like
on your DS cartridge, it doesn't, or your GBA cartridge doesn't have a label anymore.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, sure.
But so I did that. I kind of went out of my way to do that because the Frog Island and the Power Gem Island are not really in places you need to go. They're just kind of there. But the other thing I spent a lot of time doing that made me want to get the fast travel in the first place was actually doing the treasure charts. Getting extra time for your hourglass is cool when you get them. Getting ship parts is just sell them to buy Power Gem at the store or whatever. But I actually learned something I didn't know or had completely forgotten, and that is the salvage arm can just straight up break.
Oh yeah, dude. Like, God, that's been my whole thing that has kept me from enjoying that whole system as much as I otherwise would be, because I think the salvage minigame in and of itself is actually kind of fun. I would say that it's in my top half of Zelda minigames for sure. Like it's fun enough to do. But yeah, like it stresses me out just because you can break that thing. And if you break it, you've got to go all the freaking way back to Merkay Island to repair it, which is just a huge pain in the butt. Like it's just a massive
not as
drag.
much of a pain once you have a frog that's in the vicinity to get you over there. But yeah, like I knew I was getting hit playing the game, but I assumed it was like you have 5 hits and then you fail, and then you just try again and you have 5 more hits. Like I just thought that was your really generous. Here's how many tries you get each time. I did not realize that it was a permanent damage to the salvage arm.
Yeah,
that you then had to go repair. So I was pretty surprised when I went and did that, and I actually went back to Cannon Island trying to get Ito is his name, I think, to repair it, and he's like, "Oh no, you need to go to Merkay Island if you break it." I was like, "Really? What? Why?"
It's not a great here. Right, that's the thing. It's not a great system, and it's one of those where I'm kind of struggling to think of what even like the rationale would have been for doing it this way. Like, what's the aside from just purely more things to do is better as like a gameplay design mentality, which I don't necessarily agree with. Like, why in the world are you making this salvage arm breakable? I just don't see what purpose it serves. It's annoying. But yeah, I mean, it is what it is, I guess. But yes, you can definitely break the salvage arm.
So yeah, I broke the salvage arm and had to do that. And I had not gone to the traveler ships or anything. So I met the fake hero with the dead King of Red Lion's boat or whatever, and
you met the zombie corpse of the King of Red Lions.
Yeah, and there was another guy who was just faking dead on the ground. So I did that. I did all that stuff. Ran into pirates. Ran into Jolene. But I kind of made the rounds and tried to do everything I could. Went and saw the Wayfarer, but I haven't done the Mermaid Quest yet. I did play the Cannon minigame, which I think is really fun.
Yeah, I agree. I like the canon minigame a lot. I also went and saw The Wayfarer. I knocked out the mermaid quest this week, which I thought was just like, I really do think that Jolene's little sister, the mermaid cosplayer, is kind of definitely the latest in a long tradition of just really goofy Zelda side characters, you know?
Yeah, no, it's all great. Yeah, I do. Like, that's one part I really remember. I think I may have actually written the guide for it on Zelda Universe. So it's like, I think or at least edited it or something, because I just have very distinct memory of working on this and knowing about it and thinking it was funny.
And it's just, it's even funnier because, you know, when you actually think about it, there's some really creepy stuff that's going on in the like interpersonal dynamics between like the old Wayfarer and like the, you know, the girl in the mermaid costume, and then she's like hitting on Linebeck, and Linebeck is uncomfortable. It's, you know, it's all funny. It really is a good time. So I did all that. I got 10 power gems as well, and you know, I didn't think that I had been keeping up with that really particularly well. I couldn't have told you how many I had before this week. And then on a lark, I went and checked. I was like, I wonder how many power gems. Like, I looked up how many do I need to upgrade the sword. And I went and looked, and I was like, oh, I have 8 already. Okay, cool. Like, I wasn't even necessarily like trying too hard to do this. So go me. And then I got the last 2 that I needed in the Temple of the Ocean King on that run. So that was pretty great, and I just sailed on over to the island and upgraded my sword. I do think it's funny that Ciela gives you like a little guilt trip about equipping one of the other fairies, right? And I was just like, why do games do that to me? Like, why do you give me this upgrade that is like objectively better in every possible way, and then like my sidekick character, you know, tells me, like, says something to me that makes me feel like an asshole.
Yeah, and I actually did note you all had been talking about how, like, this idea is like, do you really control Link in this game, or do you control Ciela? And how it like made you feel a little bit closer to Ciela because you were actually moving around, and now you're just moving around the nameless spirit of power.
Right. The spirit of power has a name. Its name is Leaf for some reason.
Oh, you're right. You're right. They're not nameless. I'm wrong with that.
Yep.
Yeah, I had forgotten. Yeah. So yeah, now Ciela's just in your pocket or whatever, and
I would say that they're personality-less, but that's another discussion entirely. So got that done. Let's see, 1 or 2 salvage mini games. I broke the salvage arm, and then almost threw my DS, and then did no more of that. Let's see what else. I think that's mostly it for Bloopy Trails. Definitely more things that were kind of fun to get up to this week. It has been pretty light for Matt and I as well from this perspective. I still think that side quests are an area where this game is just kind of generally falls short. You know, side quests, side characters. Like, there's a few pretty decent ones, but for the most part, it's just kind of not up to par, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's not one of the stronger parts of the game, but I do like what's there.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and move on to part 5, which is Z targeting, where we lock onto fascinating characters or enemies that we happened across. I was back and forth between Jolene's sister, the mermaid, and Goron, and I think I'm going to go with Jolene's sister, which I know she has a name. I forget what it is. I've just been calling her the mermaid, but she does have an actual name. But yeah, again, like I said a second ago, I thought that this character was just absolutely hilarious. Like, this is the kind of character that would show up in Link's Awakening, for instance. Someone who's just like quirky in that way and is a part of like a very weird relationship dynamic with another character. I'm thinking of like Mr. Right and the Goat Woman, you know?
Right. Yeah. Christine.
Yeah, Christine, my bad. She probably doesn't like it when you call her the Goat Woman. But like a very similar style of thing here. And I just got a real big kick out of it. But yeah, my runner-up definitely goes to Goron for being just a pretty good companion character, and for like having actual functional use in a dungeon, which is always a good thing for a character to have. How about yourself?
Yeah, so first I looked up her name because I couldn't think of it either. So Jolene's sister is named Joanne.
Okay, cool.
Which should be easier to remember than it is.
Right.
Goron is like the easy choice again, because he is like an interesting side character, and is a jerk to you when you first meet him for no reason. But I'm going to go with a more obscure choice, partially because I realized we didn't talk about the character earlier, and apparently it is just called Massive Eye.
Oh,
it is
crap.
The blackfish mini boss thing that you fight on your way to Goron Island.
I glossed completely over this thing because it was so forgettable that I did just literally forget it.
So that's going to be the Z target, so we don't forget it. I actually was fighting it like wrong initially. I thought I had beaten up its eyes good enough, and I had not. So I think I about lost on it. Because I thought I was about to win the fight, and then I got my last shot in and realized I had to hit each eye more than one time. So that's just a big flying fish with 6 eyes, right? That shoots little balls at you.
It definitely wasn't just you. I did not have a good immediate sense of the correct way to do this. And then once I started realizing that eyes were like changing a color and then going away, I was kind of like, okay, well, I get it now. Definitely. I'm not sure if this is just a thing where it's like before each new major island, you have to fight some kind of sea critter. Because this is the second time I think that you've had to do that. And I don't hate it. It's fine. It's whatever. I don't think that it's particularly super entertaining, but just as far as like adding something extra to do, then I think it's fine. I thought that this creature actually looked a bit like a Muktarok from Tears of the Kingdom.
Well, it does kind of, doesn't it? No, you're right. It does. I was going to say, this may have been said before when you had to fight that other little boss. It feels like they're trying to replace the big Octos from the Wind Waker. But this fight in particular kind of feels more like a Star Fox boss to me. And I love Star Fox. So I do appreciate that. Since it's all on rails, you're not controlling the ship. It's just about shooting down the little missiles that it's shooting at you. And some of those missiles actually look like the ones in Star Fox 64. Almost like they reuse the asset. And you're just having to hit the little weak point eyes. And a lot of Star Fox ships, they have things that basically just look like eyes, almost just a big diamond to shoot. It just kind of reminds me of Star Fox. And it's a neat little guy. And also we forgot about him, and that wasn't right.
that you're right. That's a oversight on my part. There we go. The character.
I remembered him a few minutes after we started talking about the dungeon because I just had Zelda Wiki open and saw it here. I was like, oh,
that is a good shout about Star Fox, though. I mean, Nintendo's other notable shoot him in the eye property, right?
Right.
I think that's pretty good shout there. But I mean, I do feel slightly bad that I forgot this encounter, but also not at the same time because there was a lot of other stuff going on and almost all of it was better than that. So,
and why doesn't it have a name? Why is its name Massive Eye?
Well, I feel like if it was literally just one massive eye, then I could have understood that.
Yeah, but it's not. It's like a flying whale thing.
No, it's what it is several medium-sized eyes. So I feel like its name is actually very misleading.
So, yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you for making sure that we didn't get out of this episode without talking about Massive Eye. Let's get into part 6, which is our final thoughts, in which we wrap up this section of the game in as succinct a way as we can think to do. This is one that I actually almost never get to do. I never take over this one for Matt, except for when he's out, which I think has only ever happened once before now. So it's going to be very fun. So we have our immediate next section of game after the middle chapter on the ghost ship. We tie up the story happenings there with a new quest to reassemble a phantom sword so that we can defeat Bellum. We visit some new and interesting places. We unlock a new quadrant of the sea, and we visit the Gorons, which are all in all a very fun crew of people to get to know. We meet Gongoron, who is a great character in his own right, a great companion character. And these happenings all lead us to what is yet another in what has become a long line of excellent dungeons in this game. We get our first piece of pure metal in the Crimsonine, and get one step closer to reassembling our badass monster-destroying Phantom Sword. And that's all I got for that, and I think that about sums it up. Which, of course, does bring us to the end of the Sacred Realms Rundown for this week. We'll be back next week with another installment of the Sacred Realms Rundown, and we'll be welcoming back the detective himself, Mike, to talk about the Ice Temple. Josh, I really appreciate you stepping in for Matt on this one. It was immensely helpful. I think the very last thing that anybody wanted was for me to just sit here and talk to myself about this section of game for a few hours. I feel like that's the podcast that nobody was asking for.
Yeah, being Matt for a night is a new experience and very good. Big thumbs up.
I feel like you have a much less cynical natural edge to your observations than Matt does, which is totally okay. We keep him around for that reason. He balances out my my somewhat alternate approach to doing things. But
my super positivity toward the Zelda series is not extremely common.
Yeah, I mean, to the Zelda series in totality, right? I mean, it's
not very many people will correct you every single time you forget to mention Triforce Heroes existing.
Mm-hmm. Which I hate to break it to you, like I'm coming around on the idea of like playing some of these other multiplayer, like Four Swords adventures and things. That all sounds fun. There's no dark corner of my mind where I've come around on thinking like, maybe Triforce Heroes is something that we should do for this podcast.
It's like you and I had been talking about Four Swords adventures, right? And it's like it is a hassle to set up Four Swords adventures. But once you have it set up, it's just going to work the way it's supposed to, and it's actually really fun. Triforce Heroes, even if you're all standing in the same room, literally just a couple of feet from each other, it's going to have a communication error, and it's going to kick you out. And that's without it being, and then you have to restart the whole level, even if you're right at the end of it. And that's without using the online service at all, which will do it even more. So I don't blame you. I think the game is good. It's just the tech part of it is messy.
Yeah. Well, the messy tech part of this game has been the main reason that we've been kind of bitching about it. So I feel like we would, I feel like we'd have a very similar situation with Triforce Heroes, but I guess never say never. But yeah, no, a really great discussion though. Definitely, really fun to have you on, and looking forward to doing it all again in a few weeks when we have you back for Muto's Temple, and we actually have a three-way discussion again, which I think is going to be a really good time. I'm really curious to see how Matt feels about everything we talked about today when I catch up with him next week, because on the one hand, I'm thinking maybe I got to believe that he was seeing and feeling similar things to what I was in this whole section of the game and came away with similar responses and whatnot. But on the other hand, I feel like we're going to log on to next week's episode and I'm going to ask him how he felt about it. He's going to be like, it's crap, hated it all, nothing to like here.
Anshus are ruined, Gorons are ruined.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like that would be very uncharacteristic because we've had nothing but praise for the items and everything, but you really just never know.
It's just an escort quest.
Another escort? Come on. Yeah, I feel like could happen. It could. I feel like the odds are pretty low, though. I think there's a good chance that he probably enjoyed this mostly as much as I did. But that is a question that we will answer for next week. Until then, Josh, do you want to just go ahead and do that thing where you let everybody know where they can follow you and keep up with you online?
Yeah, so of course, I'm one of the webmasters of ZeldaUniverse.net, so you can find lots of stuff we're doing there. All sorts of Tears of the Kingdom stuff right now. And if you're listening this week, we're actually having our big annual charity marathon this weekend, which is hosted on Twitch. I think it starts Thursday. But yeah, you can find me on the Sacred Realms Discord if you want to hang out with me and chat. I probably spend way too much time in there. But otherwise, I've been making the rounds to all of the new social media platforms. So you can follow me. I am Watcher Joshua is what I go by, and I am on Threads, Mastodon, and Blue Sky, and then also Instagram, where I am mostly posting the same things on all 3 or 4 till it's all sorted out.
Which is what we're all doing these days, right? Just posting the same thing to like multiple social platforms.
So, but yeah, Watcher Joshua is what I go by there. Or you can just come hang out with me on Discord.
Which I highly recommend because, like I said earlier in the episode, the Sacred Realms Discord community is spectacular, and we have a lot of really good conversation in there.
You know what? We maybe both forgot, but I promised that I would answer a question from Discord about pronouncing things wrong.
There you go. You did promise that. You really did.
You actually reminded me of one. I have always said Hinox, not Hinox. I feel like I didn't start hearing Hinox until Breath of the Wild came out. And then suddenly everyone was saying Hinox, which then confused me more because I initially said Sidon, not Sidon.
Now,
so
see,
why
that one is
Sidon and Hinox and not Hinox and Sidon?
That is a great question. I will say that I have always used Hinox and Hinox interchangeably. Like if you go back throughout the entirety, like if some crazy person wants to go back and re-listen to all of our past episodes, you'll notice that like I've probably used both of them pretty much 50-50 because nobody's ever like corrected me on it.
Right. No, the other big one that I still kind of make fun of myself nowadays for, although I feel like it's still like grammatically correct English. But when I was much younger, basically until Super Smash Bros. Melee came out and corrected me, I called him Ganon and Ganondorf.
Whoa.
Because if it was going to be Ganon, it should have 2 N's. That's how English works, I would have thought. Me and a bunch of my friends and family, like we all called him that until the announcer in Smash Brothers corrected us. And of course, this was very like pre-internet, early internet days, so there wasn't a mob telling me I was wrong. It was just it was 5 people, you know. So I did that one, and then the one that still makes me upset is that we've apparently all settled on the Goddess of Courage being named Furore and not Furore. And I called her Furore for a very long time. And I conformed, and I call her Furore now, but I hate it.
I think that's one where I get where you're coming from, and even though I have always said Furore, it's one of those where I have always kind of thought in the back of my mind, am I saying this right? Just because it's like, you know, it's never been spoken aloud as far as I can remember. And it's a kind of a weird looking word. I'm kind of the same with, so going back to Majora's Mask again for like the upteenth time this episode, Cafe, or I don't know how you're actually supposed to pronounce that character's name. I don't know if it's K-Fi or what. I've always said
cafe.
Cafe. I've always said cafe, like I was just like trying to say coffee in a slightly more interesting way. And I have no idea if that's correct, but
yeah, going back on the goddess, right? And that's this kind of contradictory on the other things of like in English, it's furore, right? Like the E is silent every time. The Japanese name is Furoru. And if you were pronouncing it as if it were Japanese, it would be Furore, the way it's spelled. So it's kind of are we pronouncing it in English or Spanish? Or not Spanish, English or Japanese? Also, they're Bokoblins, and I don't care if Nintendo says they're not.
Bokoblins?
Yes.
I don't think I could ever get used to that, but
It's
I
a
think
Boko
that's just
club and a Boko stick, and it's a Bokoblin who has a Boko stick.
I think just because it's like they all do say Bokoblins, and I think I've just picked
everyone
up on
says
it for that reason.
It just, to me, the part that matters is Blin. They're all Blins. There's Moblins and Mini Blins and Bokoblins.
Don't forget Horriblins.
Yes, and now Horriblins. So I don't know why only that one, it's Coblin that matters, not the Blin that matters, when they're not Horricoblins.
You're right. They're not that. It's hilarious. Okay. Cool.
There we go. That's been part 47 or whatever.
I'm glad we could all walk down that road together. Part 48 is this question that I'm getting in chat about when we can expect your 12-hour Phantom Hourglass documentary.
All right. Well, we got about 2.5 hours of it done now, and maybe we'll get another couple hours done in a few weeks.
There you go, chipping away just a bit at a time. Can't wait. If there was any one Zelda game that people are clamoring for a 12-hour documentary of, there's no doubt that it's this one.
For sure, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I think
there's been enough of those Ocarina of Time retrospectives. We don't need any more of those.
Exactly. Do something new. That's what I'm saying. All right, Josh. Well, I think that it is time to get out of here for the week. Again, thank you so much for coming on the show, and we will catch up with you again here in just a few weeks, okay?
Yep. It's cool.
Awesome. All right, y'all. If you enjoyed today's show and you'd like a little extra Sacred Realms in your life, you can head over to patreon.com/sacredrealmspod and become a patron. If you've got no rupees, it is not a problem. 5-star Apple Podcast reviews are a great free way to support us. More reviews means that more people see our show. That makes us very happy Hylians. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Sacred Realms Pod for updates on the podcast and for behind-the-scenes action. Sacred Realms will be back next week with our thoughts on Phantom Hourglass Chapter 6. We would love for you to play along with us and to share your thoughts on our social channels. Phantom Hourglass can, of course, be played on the Nintendo 2DS or 3DS or Wii U, which we have not been mentioning in this outro, but it seems like maybe we should just continue not mentioning that. But there you go. You can play it on the Wii U. But in the meantime, may your hearts be full, may your arrows never miss, and we will catch y'all next week. Sacred Realms is an independent, listener-supported podcast, which is produced, edited, and mixed by me, Lyndon Willoughby. Business operations are handled by Matt Willoughby. Our music is generously provided by Darknuck and is available to listen to on Spotify. Finally, we'd like to thank Nintendo for continuing to create such exceptional and innovative experiences.